Hi, welcome to my show where I get to interview really awesome people who are authors, filmmakers, influentials. Today I have activist and attorney John
Kulesz.
Kulesz. When we rehearsed this, I did a better job at it, so I didn't want to mess it up. But I met John actually at Panera Bread. I was interviewing Fayrouz Saad, who was running for Congress, and you were there.
I was there with Padma Kupa,
Okay.
talking about her potential run for the state representative seat, and we got to talking, and I sold you on the idea of coming to the Constitution Café.
Yes, I remember that. Well, the way you described it, I was just like, within 5 minutes, I was convinced. So you're a good attorney. You can also provide your address to that if you want.
Well, the Constitution Café, if I can hold up the book.
Sure, yeah.
It emerged out of the controversies that Troy had for several years over its library, and we had a mayor that wound up getting recalled, so there was a recall drive, and I became an activist in that time, trying to help people and form messages and form groups to save the library and to help the recall. And in that activism, I met Lorraine Campbell. She's the executive director of the Troy Historic Village. And we got to talking over a beer, and she wanted to come up with some way of getting people to talk to each other, to create a space where people could talk politics in a way that was respectful and level and just honest with each other. And I happened to mention the existence of this book, The Constitution Café. Mm-hmm. It was written by Christopher Phillips, and it's sort of the inspiration for the group, where this gentleman went around to various people in the country and discussing portions of the Constitution. And so Lorraine got a copy of the book, and she read it, and she called me and said, "When can you start?"
Oh, that easy. Because, this book by Constitution Café by Christopher Phillips. Okay. And I came to one of the meetings that you had.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I did is because, and I think we talked about this a little bit, is that, so I was born in Baghdad, Iraq, and I came here as a child. I was 10 years old. One of the things that myself and other immigrants we found in the United States is that the people were not as politically informed as we thought, and we were surprised by that. And here's why. So where we come from, we can't become politically informed. You could risk your life doing so, and people did. Yet politics was discussed. It was understood. We knew what was happening even though we couldn't read about it. We couldn't go to the libraries and find books, but it circulated. Politics was more of a natural thing to talk about in the homes, and if you go to the coffee shops and things like that. And little by little, what we realized is that the Americans were very comfortable because of their democracy, and Americans have a very rich lifestyle, really, in general, compared to other nations. So that had them be kind of more laid back, like they didn't feel that they had to know so much. So when you were telling me about this idea, I'm like, yes, we really, really need this.
Well, one of the major problems that this country has is that people, they talk about the Constitution as if they know what's actually in it. And when Lorraine approached the Oakland County Bar Foundation to get a grant to run this conversation, she had some interesting statistics about the percentage of people who don't actually know, of American citizens who don't actually know that there are 3 branches of government. They don't know, they can't name the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. They don't know how many members of the Supreme Court there are. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things Americans take for granted that they believe about the Constitution and the constitutional system, but they don't actually know.
Okay, but why? Okay, so why is that, though, to begin? From your understanding, and you're born here, correct? You were born in the United States. So you might be able to give, what is your observation about this?
Well, but I have legal training, okay? Mm-hmm. And so I went to law school. And we discussed the Constitution once on the first day of law school, and that was it.
Really?
Yes. I took a constitutional law class, but that's about specific provisions of the Constitution and how it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court. So here's the current understanding of these passages now. But when it comes right down to it, most attorneys don't know that there are rules in the Constitution for various things, like the amount of representatives we're supposed to have. Article 1 says we're supposed to have one representative for every 30,000 people in this country, right?
Okay.
Which means if we stuck to that formula, we'd be at a House of Representatives that has over 10,000 people in it.
But we're not.
But we don't.
Okay.
Right. So the question becomes why? Why don't we have that? Well, there was a law passed by Congress that set 435 representatives in amber. We've locked that down. So the question becomes, well, why? And what does that do for representation? If we're supposed to have one for every 30,000, but we're now at one for every 750,000 or so, how can we say that we have a truly representative government? And when you bring this out to a group of people who are willing to just discuss it and struggle with it, we come up with ideas that we may want to alter the Constitution. We may want to amend it. We may want to talk about what it means to have a representative in a Socratic, intelligent way. And to have people do this is kind of a little tiny miracle.
Okay, so this is, it's good that you just brought that up. Why is that a little bit of a miracle? Because in my case, so I recently wrote a book. It took me 6 years. It was a political book, but I still wrote it in a literary form and tried to focus on the family aspect of what was going on. But there was so many politics. I was learning so much about our own government and even the government where I was born. And I would read it in a writer's group, and I would find people having such a hard time stomaching some of the information, even though I did it in a literary form and I detached myself. I mean, I'm an author first and foremost, so I saw that discomfort. I saw, for instance, in 2004 when my first novel came out, so I was interviewed a lot on radios, and some people would be upset if they heard something that I said I experienced. If I said I experienced, I had a nice childhood in Iraq. If I just said something like that, and people were very, some people, I'm not going to, but some people would call in feeling offended. And then I started understanding what this was. So this was right after the war. And so they wanted to hear something else because maybe they had their sons or daughters or somebody that was serving there. And so they wanted to feel like the truth is what they were hearing. And so oftentimes what happens in my case, especially given that I'm an immigrant, sometimes I back off because I wonder if me saying certain aspects is more uncomfortable. Now, when you're saying this, is it still not uncomfortable, but yes, there is that kind of a challenge, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. We've discussed this very issue. Why don't people know this stuff in the group? That always comes up as a subject. And most people point to the education system, that they don't teach civics anymore. And if they taught civics, people would be taught to be civically responsible. And I'm not sure that that's the simple reason for it. I think we live in an era where a lot of politics gets marketed. It gets focus tested, and it gets marketed not necessarily for the truth of the matter. It gets marketed for the sellability and the ability for people to gain an office on things they not necessarily will believe in. They'll tell you it's true simply because it'll gain the vote. And so
is that very difficult to undo? Is that what it's?
Well,
yeah, it's like getting my kids off of their iPads or something.
Well, it depends on the issue, doesn't it? I mean, if we're supposed to have one for every 30,000 for the purposes of representatives, that means if you if you dilute that number to 750,000, and then you do something like gerrymandering and pack people into districts where the who the representative is going to be is predetermined because you've packed in enough R's or enough D's to control that district, then you have a person who is pandering to a small percentage of the actual electorate and not to the people themselves. So gerrymandering is one of those things. There's no rule against gerrymandering in the Constitution, but that's the question. Should there be a rule against gerrymandering? I hope I'm answering your question.
Well,
it's not a simple question.
Well, but you're saying the way that things are marketed. So is it because if something is marketed in a certain way, let's say right now, if what I'm wearing and somebody comes and says, well, this was made in this kind of a factory and it's hurting this kind of a people, I'm going to listen to that. And if it means like I stop buying this, but I'll listen, initially I might have not known, I might have really liked this, but then this is going to affect me. But I find with politics, it seems like if somebody's listening to something that might kind of be uncomfortable because that's not what they were and why is it difficult to look into it further? They don't have to take what you're saying into account, but there's a wall that goes up.
Right. I think frequently we retreat to our own echo chambers. We look.
It's easier.
It's easier and it's not challenging. Mm-hmm. We can listen to conservative media or liberal media, and they'll just tell us what we want to hear. Mm-hmm. The challenge is to reach across the aisle, listen to that person, and try to actually struggle with their ideas. Mm-hmm. And that's something we try to do with the cafe. We have every political stripe in that room. We have people who are members of the Tea Party, very conservative. We have self-identified socialists in the room.
Okay.
And the trick is to just get them to talk to each other.
I love that. I love that. That I didn't know that your audience consists of that kind of diversity. But that's so healthy. And I believe diversity in any way, whether, with regards to origin, with ethnicity, or with regards to politics. And this is what I see today, too, is that each one is blocking the other. If you're on the right, honestly, before, especially with this election, I didn't even have myself labeled either or. I just voted. And this is the first time where, sadly, I saw these two parties fighting. The reason I say sadly is because again, coming from a country where people are at each other all the time, this is what this country is about, that you can discuss these things, that it's okay. You don't have to feel like the person, if they don't have the same opinion, that they become your enemy. But can you, by the way, before I forget, tell people when you guys meet. I think that's very important, and they should really go and attend this.
Oh, yes. We do it the second Sunday of every month at the Troy Historic Village. It's located on the northwest corner of Wattles and Livernois. It's at 2:00 in the afternoon in the old church. We did it 2 weeks ago, a week ago this past Sunday, and we had 40 people in the room to discuss the census.
Okay.
And when it comes for the purposes of the census, we're supposed to count people, but there's always a question of how. There are ideas in the Constitution, and when people retreat to their little towers and they listen to only those things that they believe in, or only those things that affirm their beliefs, it can do damage to the political situation, because then politicians are just counting voters. I'll get this person, and I win, and I can enforce whatever I would like. And so the idea is to get people to engage with the actual text of the Constitution. I always start with the text of the Constitution itself. And then we just ask questions. How should we count people? Should we count people more than every 10 years? What should this data be used for? Should we ask citizenship questions, which is a modern controversy? The Constitution simply says count people, but it doesn't tell us how. And so we're in an age right now, or we're in a moment in which citizenship is being held as the ultimate arbiter of everything, that we don't want certain people from certain places to come into this country. Well, the question is why, and what does the Constitution say about what our attitude should be to other people in other lands, and whether we should welcome them here? There are rules about territories and how we make states in the Constitution. One of my favorite examples of just getting to people to talk about things, we talked about the post office, and someone came to me and said, "Why are we going to talk about the post office?" And I said, "Because it's in the Constitution."
Is it?
It is. It's a power of Congress to have a post office.
Well, yeah, it sounds like the Constitution is a lot more fun than people give it credit. I mean, if it's layered, I think we just have an impression of what it's about until a subject comes up, and it's aired on CNN or Fox or whoever. This is where we're getting our information, basically.
Right. And those people who are telling you about what the Constitution says are interpreting it in a way that they want to. There's power in interpretation.
Oh, wow.
And so when a person stands up and says free speech means this, we as citizens, we as people of the United States should be able to stand up and say, why does free speech mean that? There's a controversy right now before the Supreme Court involving baking a cake. Yes, I know.
This is a true story.
This is a true story.
Okay.
A gay couple went into a baker in Colorado and had a portfolio of cakes they would like to have baked, possibilities with a cake baker.
Okay.
The baker said, "No, I won't use my talents in baking cake to support gay marriage." So the gay couple sued. And they have fought this all the way to the Supreme Court. And the argument is based in free speech. The cake baker is saying, I shouldn't be compelled to bake a cake because my artistic expression is found in a cake. And I can't support gay marriage through my artistic endeavor. The gay couple is saying, you're selling a cake. You're a business. This is no different than if a African American couple were to come in and you would refuse them service. And so the question becomes, is that free speech? Because the Constitution just simply says we have free speech. It doesn't say what it is. And what it is a product of discussion, of argument, of thought. And that's something we want to struggle with in the Constitution Café. Otherwise, we just leave it to the lawyers. If we want to leave it all to the lawyers, I know a lot of lawyers who would say, thank you very much, get out your checkbook. But to be civically engaged in a political way means we have to struggle with these ideas.
And this is an opportunity.
Yes.
This is not something that people should deter from for any reason. It's a challenge. It's almost, to me, it's like exercising. We need to exercise. It feels good. Once you get used to it, you realize this is the way to go. If you're just going to not do it for a long enough time, it's going to be harder and harder to participate. But it's healthy. It's healthy intellectually. It's healthy for our country. It's healthy, and it affects us.
Right.
Now, have you noticed anything has changed with the recent elections, and have you seen more participation based on a lot of the activities that has happened?
I have seen an increase in the amount of people who are participating.
Okay. Because I feel the same way.
Across the political spectrum.
Okay, and that's a good thing.
And it's a very good thing. What's interesting is that what makes me happy at the end of a cafe is when people will email me and they'll say, I discussed this with my wife or my husband on the way home, and we've been arguing about this and discussing it for days. Mm-hmm. Then I've done my job. I've accomplished something. What's interesting is that they'll email me and want to continue the conversation with me.
They want you to be the judge of who's right.
Well,
Is this
they want, people frequently want answers. And I think that's what politics has reduced itself to in this country. We have answers. Well, the answers are frequently less interesting than the questions, because the questions are what we struggle with. The ideas are what we need to struggle with. And
and that struggle, and again, when you're whatever challenges you, so we're challenged to exercise, we're challenged to eat good, we're challenged to get higher degrees. But when it comes to politics, there's a saying that I also found here. They said, two topics you don't want to discuss. You don't want to discuss politics and religion. That's all we discuss in the middle. And I wondered why, and these are the two topics that really affect our lives. I mean, for myself as a Christian, why not? I like to learn when I go to church. I want to know what's in the Bible. What is it saying? And the same thing with politics. I want to know because this affects me. And this is the thing. They said, don't bring up these two topics. And then with the one thing that also I saw with these elections, with people unfriending each other.
yes.
I thought, come on.
Well, the people who have unfriended each other, they've forgotten how to talk to each other.
Yeah, that's a good way. Yeah.
They've forgotten how to talk, and I think the converse is true. They've forgotten how to listen. There's a philosopher, who was at one of the University of California schools, and he said, if we have a right to free speech, do we have a duty to listen? If free speech is going to exist, do we at least need to give our neighbors the room to give their opinion, and should we listen to it? And
the answer is yes.
Well,
don't you think?
As a lawyer, I'm always going to say it depends. It depends on
how?
what the opinion is. There are some opinions I can't agree with and can't.
No, but agreeing is different than listening.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Like, listening is where if somebody's going to make a comment, you're not going to. Shutting somebody up is unfriending them, in my opinion. You're saying be quiet.
I think that's right.
You know what? Your words are going to cost you. Now, it's different if the person is being vulgar, if we're not talking
vulgar,
about
racist,
that. Right. There's
obscene.
Right. There's certain things everybody would agree on. But this was happening early on, that just because of a certain political stance. Again, all this comes from my experience of us not being able to be comfortable as Christians, as us not being comfortable being anti-Ba'athist. So we had to hide who we are for survival. We don't want this to happen in this country. So I say to people, and these are my friends, the friends who have the same political views that I have, they don't agree with the other side, and there's been issues. And I said, but we can listen to them. Some of them have admitted that they have a hard time doing that. And I think part of the reason why I can, not only is because I have a lot of people that are on the other side, but also because I come from a country where being on the other side is dangerous. Now, that's the last thing I want to happen in the United States. And,
I agree. And listening and taking seriously the opinions of others is one way we actually resolve that issue.
Exactly. And we can learn how to live together as we are making this together. It's just like when it's like when you cook something together, when you sit to eat together. This is what the meaning of, I feel, the Constitution Café. I really love the title.
Well, you have to thank Christopher Phillips for that.
Well,
we've had him.
I think it's great that you're carrying on to this.
Well, he did a group called the Socrates Cafés, and there are Socrates Cafés happening all around the world where people are coming together to discuss philosophical ideas.
Okay.
This was his second project. So there are projects all over the country of people discussing the ideas in the Constitution with each other. Now, I was leaving one of these group discussion meetings, and an older woman was with me, and we were talking together, and she said, "It's amazing. People can sit in a room and talk to each other respectfully without screaming at each other." And I said, yes.
And that's
all you gotta want to do is try.
And that's exactly what I witnessed when I went.
Thank you.
That is why I enjoyed it. First of all, I really enjoyed it because everything that you were bringing up, I'd never heard of. So given that I'm a writer, I read a lot, I love history, whatever. I love conversations. You know when you're like watching a really good movie and the whole thing just goes by so quick, and then you're like, you know, oh, that's how I felt by the time I walked out. There was so much stuff that I wanted to go home and even look further into it. But aside from it wasn't just about the topic, yes, but the atmosphere was healthy. People were listening. The questions that they were bringing up, everybody was, you know, and you were making them think.
Well, my job isn't to give answers. I stick to the Socratic method
you were making
completely.
Everybody think and asking questions, and I'm like, I'm staying out of this one. I have no idea what he's talking about.
When I first started the cafe, I wanted to fill the empty spaces. I would ask a question, and then it would be dead silence. Because that took me back to law school when the professor would go ask a question and everyone was just too scared to answer the question. I was like, good thing I'm sitting in the back here
where I can hide. But people were engaging.
That's the trick. That's the goal of the cafe. I'm not there for answers. And I had one older gentleman look at me and goes, I'm going to ask you a question. Now, you're going to answer me with another question back at me, but I'm still going to ask you the question. And that's the goal. This is in the spirit of Socrates. Socrates was the guy who knew that he knew nothing, which made him the wisest man in Greece. And so I'm not saying I'm Socrates. I'm just saying that my goal is to get people to step back and think a little bit about the implications of what they're saying.
And that's what I liked when I attended. It wasn't because I wasn't sure, you know, really I wasn't sure what it was going in. But because we had an initial conversation, I felt like it was something that I would enjoy. And I went in and it's like it's a blank page. You know, you're not trying to divert anybody into any direction. And that's part of what I dislike about some of the mainstream media. It's like they can't, everybody's pulling you into different directions. But once you have that figured out, then you have to take responsibility to find your own information.
They're marketing an idea. They're not necessarily helping you explore truth, solutions, ideas.
Independent thinking.
Independent thinking.
I really encourage people to spend their Sundays. It's once a month or
once
twice?
A month, second Sunday every month.
It's once a month. I mean, what a treat
for the mind. It's an hour and a half.
Yes, it's really
free.
Great, and it's free, and you get to meet, you know, really intellectual people who care enough to spend time to learn about their Constitution. So, if you want to just please repeat the day and the time and the place. And
second Sunday every month at the Troy Historic Village at the northwest corner of Wattles and Livernois, or Wattles and Livernois, 2 o'clock in the old church. Okay. Second Sunday. Next month we're taking up the separation of powers. Why do we have 3 branches of government? We do.
Right, but why?
The Constitution doesn't explain why.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
It will be. Well, and I have to admit, like I said last time, you know, it was. I liked what the people brought up, and it makes you really think. So.
I'm very pleased to hear that. That's the goal.
So, and you know, you might end up coming back here because I know you have so many topics. Like we said, you know, we're not going to be able to cover everything this time, but maybe one time you can come just to cover a particular topic.
If you want a Socratic discussion, I'd be more than happy to do one.
Yes, I think the audience would love that. Thank you so much for coming, John.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. We'll see you guys next time.